honoured to have Judith Weir, Master of the Queen's Music, mentoring me in Arts SA Fellowship, and also as a patron of Artaria. And we're linking across the world and showing how literally the opposite sides of the world in this COVID life, we can still talk to each other and be connected in real time. So that's really very special. And thank you, Angie, for facilitating an interview for us.
Okay, no problem. All right then. Well, if it's okay, Judith, can we, for the benefit of anyone watching this that maybe doesn't know what the Master of the Queen's Music entails, could you just give us a general gist of what your role is?
Oh, okay. I mean, this is a very old role, 400 years in the royal household, so it's changed so much over the years. It has no specific duties laid down. As far as working actually with the royal household and the Queen, I write in normal times 1 or 2 pieces a year for national events, anniversary events, that kind of thing, which the Queen would attend. I do some things to do with Buckingham Palace. We award a medal, you know, that kind of thing, trying to keep an eye on certain musicians. Now, I'm sorry to say I'm getting quite bad feedback, which is making me speak even more badly than usual. Am I, yeah, maybe just the point at which I'm sitting, I'm getting let's see how it goes. That's not quite so bad. Sorry, Angie, I just
no, that's fine. Okay. So, and tell us as well how you first got involved with.
Well, I wonder if I could just finish off, because the bit I've just said about the Master of the Queen's Music is the small bit, but really it's a role that allows traveling the country nationally. And in my own capacity, I particularly try to support certain groups of the musical profession, music teachers, particularly school music teachers, amateur musicians, amateur orchestras, choirs. Actually, organists are an important group of people who I think propagate music around the country. So I'm trying to put up the flag for all the people who keep music going around the country, and I think that has some relevance in many other situations. Now I've finished, I think.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, actually, your remit has involved exploring music education, hasn't it? And,
well, indeed. I mean, that's it. I've been a teacher in many contexts myself, and really the groups that I'm talking about are the people keeping music going, whether in schools, in just private music lessons, bands, orchestras, choirs, and so on. And to me, that's all music education. Music has such a large element of teaching in it. In a sense, we're always learning and teaching as we do music. So you're quite right. That is the absolute core element of it, I think.
Okay, all right then. So tell me how you first got involved with Artaria then, because obviously I know that with digital and everything online, it does mean that the world is sort of closer together, but it is also in Australia.
Well, this is because I have known Celia Craig for an extremely long time. I think at the end of a long time ago, when she was a student, I visited York University, and I well remember that she and some of her fellow students produced a little festival of my music as part of York University's famous music department, where they really do, and they still do, the most fantastic creative work. So we kept in touch over the years. I've not been able to follow exactly what years Celia was doing what, but another event for me was when we were able to get her to play for us at the Spitalfields Festival in East End of London, which I ran for some years. And I remember a marvellous, I think it was lunchtime, solo recital that Celia gave. Anyway, fast forwarding, Celia was able to invite me to write a oboe concerto for her to play with the Adelaide Symphony. And it was then that, of course, we were in touch all the time, because that's a very interactive thing to do, to write a new work for a performer. And eventually the piece was written. I came over to Adelaide to hear the premiere. And clearly during that phase, which has been the last few years, we've had a lot more time to discuss not just Artaria, but what can and should happen in music at the moment.
Yes, absolutely. So that's I didn't realize that association was that long. That's quite...
many, dare I say, many decades. I don't want to yeah.
But yes, yeah. Okay.
And I didn't know until I connected in with Judith again decades later that our Airs from Another Planet performance was very, very soon after the world premiere. I just remember Roger Montgomery coming along and saying, hey, we've got this wind quartet and piano piece, we must play it. And it was fantastic. I suspect that Jane Manning and Tony Payne might have put him on to that. It was just a wonderful piece to play. I mean, you know, I'm sorry, it's 30 years and I'm dying to play it again. 20, yeah.
Yes,
so
it's true. Yeah, carry on.
Oh, well, tell me, what is it about Artaria specifically, though, that you're so keen to support? What is it about Artaria, what Artaria does?
Well, obviously, my longer years of work with Celia make me think that she's someone who's always got interesting, exciting ideas. There's the core of great music making, but it's rather wonderful to see that this pinging in all directions with her very active way of engaging with all the tasks that she does. So in that way, that's a very enjoyable thing in itself, and I think many other people who are involved have experienced that. But I sense that Artaria could be a model for many people around the world. It's rather wonderful that Artaria at the moment is stationed, it feels to me, in a particular spot. It's in a, I hate to keep calling it far away, because if you live in Adelaide, you don't think you're far away, but it's on its own there, and it's in a way a good place for experiment, and I think could teach us all quite a bit about how to develop new avenues of all kinds. And as I know from having worked myself now in Adelaide, it's a city steeped in culture that gives culture a really proper place. Simply walking around the streets there, you can see that it's a very gracious place which has absorbed a lot of artistic history. So in every way, it's a kind of rather great place as the launch pad for maybe some interesting new initiatives.
But it also, do you think it has a unique offering, because and especially given the times that we're in at the moment, and everyone wanting sort of, you know, to connect with things for their mental well-being, the kind of, you know, bringing together of all the different senses and putting music together with, you know, other senses. Do you think that makes it unique?
Well, that is just one of many interesting things I think that it does. This is something that was born in the internet age, and as you've just mentioned, it's sort of something that's grown up in the Zoom age, and we've all learned a lot about how we can connect around the world. This has been really important for me, just realizing once I've worked out the time distance that I can easily have a chat about music. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. In Australia, and actually that is different for me now than what it was before. So Celia and Artaria are spearheading this for me, and I imagine for some other people as well. So as you say, one interesting thing is this link with the other senses. the first impression I had of the very first Artaria thing I was sent, which was the very first recording release with these beautiful, beautiful photography of Australia. And, you know, it's not the first record release that has a lovely picture of scenery, but the fact that this comes from a place like that, I think, is important. And yes, linking to all the senses at the moment is incredibly important, keeping people's mental health alive. And I think what comes across from everything that Celia does, it's the vigor and the sense that music can give us that mental and physical energy too. Here I ought to link it to the instrument that Celia plays, the oboe, which I played as a student. And if you do that instrument properly, it's a great deal about keeping your body in shape, your breathing, your physical health. Is very, very important when you play an instrument like the oboe, a wind instrument that makes real physical demands. So I think we're linked also to something that could be of great importance health-wise.
Do you think, I mean, you know, you get the impression, don't you, online, that people have connected more and more with music and other things that can make you calm and relax a bit more, obviously in the last year?
Well, music is incredibly important at difficult times, and never before have we had the chance to find so much music online. There is good and bad, and you have to search out, I think, the things that are important to you. But the sense that music's being made by very alive musicians, people who are lively and interesting, that's the thing that I get the most out of myself. So I think to be part of this adventure is rather important. That the sense that there's a lively mind behind it is very important.
Absolutely, that's really nice to be involved in, like you say, in something new. And obviously you've been to South Australia, but were you able to explore at all the, you know, the scenery that sometimes you see in the Artaria videos? Were you able to see any of that, or like
alas,
me, have you seen it?
Alas, what happened to me as a working musician, you get very, very involved in the project itself. And I don't think I traveled half as much as I should have done. It was frankly so interesting being there for a couple of weeks and just meeting all the musicians, meeting students, just going around the city. But of course, as a visitor to a place like that, you really sense, oh, I could go on about this forever, going even into a park and the completely different flora and fauna, the wonderful smells and light. So I think through a product like this, to somehow export that round the world, it's just what people need at the moment, and we'll carry on wanting to have.
Yes, and there's another phase, isn't there, coming up for Artaria as well, because there's the public launch of the partnerships with the National Trust for South Australia and Car and Audio. So there's another, you know, it's like I feel personally hard to keep up with all the different developments, but that's the next one. Have you been involved? Have you had anything to do with the National Trust for South Australia, for instance?
Me not, because when I was working with Celia, it was very much to do with the Adelaide Symphony and with the music students in the city. I've obviously followed through Artaria, some of these incredible venues, not all of which are gracious stately homes, are they? I think there was a mental hospital involved. You know, it all seemed very interesting to me, these nooks and crannies. Well, what I want to say about that is that I think it's so great that National Trust properties, historical properties, are being linked with something which is living and contemporary. I think the danger, you know this, Angie, because we live in a country which is almost a theme park of ancient stately homes and all that. But there is a feeling that, you know, everything is of a period in the past, and we lose the liveliness that built those places in the first place. So I think to team up a historic preservation society with things that are really happening and cutting edge is again unusual and a rather great combination.
You might like to see today's event that we're doing, a subscriber donor event tomorrow in the founding homestead of South Australia, the amazing Colin Grove homestead, 1856 it is, and it's the original house, basically. And
yes.
We've just put in Karen audio speakers and a 4K enormous TV screen into their dining room. It looks incredible and sounds amazing. Yeah, so that's a beautiful, I mean, Lee, who runs Karen Audio, who's from South Australia, called it a juxtaposition. It really is. It's quite amazing. So I love that. And I know that National Trust are very, very excited about that as well, that they want their places to be living, breathing, developing venues.
I think we really have to think back and think about the incredible energy of somebody who came to a place like Colin Grove and decided to put up a homestead. You know, that takes real energy and grit.
And, the descendants are going to come to the event. That's so
fantastic.
I mean, we've got the founding documents of South Australia Company with the Angus signature on it, and the Angus ancestors will be there. And they're keeping the same family values about being custodians of the land and energizing everything that they do. It really fits beautifully with the excitement of the modern Artaria kind of future.
Well, and it's great that you're light on your feet enough, you're agile enough to respond in kind to each of these places. It's not like you have to bring in some great big company of musicians who have to do this particular thing. You're able to design something appropriate for each place that you go to.
I'm sorry, Angie, if I'm interrupting.
Sorry, we're yakking on.
For Colin Grove, like, because the house had an enormous change after World War One, when the then owner of the house, Ronald Fife Angus, went off to World War One and fought in the trenches, and then came back with an award for valour, but also then came back and thought, well, this is the 1920s. Oh, I think I'm going to spend up on this house. Let's have a party. And one of the things he did was buy what potentially could have been the most expensive piano in the world. And so we've curated a program just specifically for that piano and the space. Wow. We've got beautiful Elgar, Salut d'Amour, Chanson de Nuit type nostalgic pieces in the beginning, some Frank Bridge miniatures for piano trio, which go very nicely for us as a small trio group. And then we go into Gershwin and Poulenc, and then back to Percy Grainger. And yes, the opportunity to create a program for a space like that, and to have the ancestors there, it's quite spiritual, actually. It's amazing.
Yeah, marvelous, super, really.
Did you say the most expensive piano?
Yes.
Well, we wondered, you see, we found the serial number today, and this particular manufacturer of piano, the name is Weber Pianos, and they were in New York, and they were rivals to Steinway. And the whole point about why they were rivals to Steinway was that Steinway pianos are what we all know is famous Steinway pianos, and Weber pianos were built by a pianist. So he was a piano builder, but he was a pianist and a musician, whereas Steinway was a piano builder and not a musician. And I don't know exactly, but anyway, Mr. Weber wanted to go for sound, so he put a wooden soundboard and looser strings and different dampers, and he marketed himself to the most expensive people, because a piano was the thing to have in 1920, wasn't it? I mean, it was like having your car and audio speakers now. It was the amazing that, and actually that's a nice connection as well, because they'll be next door to each other. And the gap that they had for the pianos, there's a fireplace and there's a gap here, and then there's, you know, just the way beautiful old houses will work with the chimney. They used to have a square piano, which they bought from London, and it's still out in the hallway, and they got a piano made, but there wasn't room for a grand piano, so Weber invented a baby grand piano, and he definitely coined the term baby grand, and he also marketed his pianos as being the most expensive pianos in the world. The New York Met bought entirely Weber pianos, so they were really rated around that sort of time, and this could be the most expensive piano in the world, but certainly we thought that we'd use the title for the concert, which we're going to do again on Mother's Day, as the original baby grand, because Weber coined the term baby grand, possibly for that actual space. So when Michael's in there, is a little bit squashed, because it's a little bit squashed, but it sounds incredible. So yeah,
I was going to ask you, does
excited
it
about that.
sound different then to a, do you think it sounds different to a normal piano?
It really does. We all noticed it. When I was living there, I'm resident artist at National Trust, and I was able to go and live there for a bit in the winter, and it was freezing cold. And there's open fireplaces, no heating. So I had one fire going in one room and one fire going in the artist's apartment and nothing in the music rooms. It was freezing in there. And I went in and played the piano a bit, and I'm not a pianist, so I'm not very well. But there were some light music waltzes in the stall and a bit of Chopin and a bit of Mozart. And it was lovely that they were original music with the writing of the names on them. But the second I started playing, there was this spooky tone. It was sort of ethereal kind of tone. And now we're doing this program of Percy Granger's Colonial Song. I mean, it's the perfect place to play it. But also it has a kind of echoey mellowness about it, which is absolutely amazing. I mean, it probably would need a full overhaul to be totally amazing piano and all that sort of thing, but it's totally usable now. And it's probably 105 or 110 years old. And it was still in tune. That was the thing. It was still at 4.
I was going to ask you, do you have to have a special tuner for a special
an
piano?
expensive one, yes.
Well, I went there today and met the local piano tuner he's been fond of that piano for 20 years, so that's rather sweet. But
oh, okay. Oh, so he knows it inside out. Yeah. Okay. So Judith, are you able to, I mean, you know, the joy of digital and so on, are you able to log into events like that and feel like you're part of them?
Well, logging in live, I'm not sure if I've done that, but I've certainly watched some of them subsequently. And Artaria are great, actually, at sending out video material and some beautiful, what I call snippets, just to watch one piece. Something like that is a joy. And again, I think this is very modern. We don't all have time. I mean, we do have time at the moment, but I think just to receive, here is the colonial song, or here is the Poulenc oboe sonata or something. It's a very nice way of doing it. I can well imagine this could be something that is regularly in your inbox, perhaps every week, something from Artaria that you could listen out to, or a visit, as you say, to a National Trust property just to see that. I think I will say I always open the emails with enthusiasm and click into what there is. And I can't say that about everything else in my capacious inbox.
Do you think that, you know, there's something that could be learned by the National Trust in the UK with this? Because I mean, obviously they have events at the National Trust in England, and we have some amazing properties, but I don't know if anyone's done anything quite like this. Yeah.
Well, this is
here for me. Suddenly massively sunny. Apologies.
You're okay. No, if you're all right in it. I can't really hazard a remark about the National Trust. I will say it's something I've never had anything to do with, and maybe that's significant. It's a very different scene in England. There's just so much of that kind of property. Perhaps we have different needs from those places. You know, visiting a stately home with children or something, and fun activities of that kind. I think anybody who is running any kind of venue-based thing would do well to team up with a small, flexible organization of the order of Artaria, because they can offer so many different things in collaboration. I make that point again, that most musical enterprises aim to take a certain number of musicians around. It's important for employment's sake. I hope that carries on. But the rather great thing about Artaria is it's going to design their events according to the place that they're going to. At least that's one of their strands. And with Celia's incredible links with musicians, well, around the world, but particularly across Australia, she will never be short of collaborators to work with on these projects. So I love to think that we would have similar things happening in England. There are a lot of very creative musicians, I think particularly amongst the younger people in their 20s, but to see this working with a established musician of Celia's generation. Obviously, she has the experience and the huge, well, let's say, address book of musicians that can work with her.
Can I just add to that, Angie, that and Judith, that there's some really interesting work going on with the University of Southampton and the National Trust. And my National Trust sent me some of these videos about, you know, their original keyboards and their original work that might have been music that might have been played in their rooms. It was written, and online English universities are being incredibly creative as well. So I found lots of interesting things. But having something to come to your inbox is something that I've noticed since having stopped being an orchestral player and started finding out about running a business, basically, which is what it is. So I went on a small business tour, for example, and everybody liked the idea that I have this subscriber model in mind. I love this, the idea of you subscribing to a streaming service, and then in your inbox arrives a nice relaxing track, a 5-minute track or something like that. This is very early days for us yet, but I've had lots of good feedback from the people I met who were also running small businesses in all sorts of different fields. And the same when I chatted when we won that Winnovation SA Arts Award. So that was Women in Innovation. So these were female-led South Australian startup businesses. And all of them were saying in the stress of running a new business, and the learning curve of running a new business, they wouldn't mind just sitting down and listening to a 5-minute track. And if it had some visuals as well, which are all coming from my synesthesia, my mixing of senses and the colours and the light, as you mentioned, that you get in South Australia and Australia generally, that's a very relaxing experience, because now the whole immersion on a screen and headphones is something we've got very used to.
Yeah. Certainly.
Yeah. And you know, mental health and relaxation and deep breathing, and I mean, I was originally planning it for you know, long haul airline flights, and so now I think we're going to be part of those groups of people that imagine they're on a long haul airline, eat a little dinner
and sit at home. Yes, absolutely.
Yes. I know, we've got to laugh, and we have to laugh, really. It's the only thing we can do.
Yes. But I was going to ask you, in what sort of music have you maybe turned to, obviously in the last year when we've had a lot of time at home and so on? What have you found that's kind of helped your creativity while we're a bit housebound?
Well, the great thing is I have had a bit more time to listen at home. Celia knows this because I'm an ex-oboe player. A huge enthusiasm I have is for Bach, and particularly Bach cantatas. And again, it's incredible compared with when I started out 40 more years than that, when I myself might have occasionally played in a Bach cantata. But now on the internet, there are some marvelous performances of all the cantatas. Sites like the Netherlands Bach Society.
Yes.
So that's something I go to a lot. And in fact, Celia has been playing in a Bach cantata. That was a fascinating day when she sent me just a couple of, firstly, as ever, a little video of one of the really difficult movements that she'd been playing, but also a link to I can't begin to say how interesting it was. I spent the whole week thinking about it. I guess something that would just interest musicians about the keys in which Bach's musicians played. I won't start explaining this, but somehow just to get that little thing sent to me was so interesting. So moving on from Bach, I mean, always for relaxation, what I like is jazz. And again, this is typical of me. My favorite record of last year was somebody playing Bill Evans' transcriptions on a wonderful North German organ. It's a completely mad, it's, you know, but that's a fantastic combination for me. I guess all composers like to think of themselves as wide listeners, but we actually all have our own tracks to go down. But yeah, it's certainly been a great year for listening, and I think I won't stop this now. I think this has become a thing that I will not give up. As you say, with headphones on and visuals, that's become a thing now, really.
Absolutely, yes. And what about your work then? What have you been able to do work-wise, or have you had a break, or what's happened?
Well, this is an interesting subject of discussion with me and my colleagues. I think when suddenly last March, and same for Celia and everyone around the world who's a musician, all our work just stopped. And some composers I know immediately said, oh, well, great, at least we've got lots of spare time, we can write lots of music. I think during the year we all found that something was missing, and that something was the interchange with live music. I think when I write a piece, I'm writing down my reflections on what I've just heard. And of course, I do hear a lot of recorded music, but actually personal encounters with musicians is what counts. So in some ways, that was a little difficult for me. But in fact, what I have written is fairly typical of my output. This links, I think, to my role with this national role I have. So I've written one very large scale piece for the woodwind students of the National Youth Orchestra's training orchestra, which is called Inspire in the UK. And this is a very large group, about 100 woodwind players who are at the next level down from being in the National Youth Orchestra. There is no woodwind symphony, to my knowledge, until I wrote one this year. So I'm hugely looking forward to that being workshopped by them. When, I mean, I was going to say, Celia, what do you think the prospects are for large groups of I know you're fine in Australia, but woodwind players, we're meant to be very unhealthy still.
Well, I'm sorry about all those rules about playing and blowing.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, we're ridiculously lucky in South Australia. I mean, there's no active cases. I mean, it's because we're further apart, maybe, and further miles isolated down the bottom of the world. But also with the woodwind symphony, I hope they video it, because, you know, I would like that to arrive in my inbox. I have to say, the greatest experiences of my life, and I will never forget it because we mentioned Granger and it came up before, was Granger's Lincolnshire Posy with the British Youth Wind Band. And that was just it was mind-blowing, because it was like a whole orchestral palette, but with no strings. Lovely.
Yes.
I mean, no, I'm not blaming strings. I used to be a violinist, but just the whole sort of crunchiness of the woodwind and brass band together.
Absolutely. So that's it. So indeed, the year's been good in that way, that there were no kind of deadlines impinging, and you could think, I could get that written, and I eventually did. And I've written a cantata for a very good amateur choir, big amateur choir in London, and I'm just now writing a piece for amateur orchestra. The new Edinburgh Orchestra has commissioned me. Writing for amateurs, good music that's not just so super hard to play is a very important part of what I'm trying to do at the moment. Hopefully music that people could get together, just as you've said, Celia, with young people or in big groups that wouldn't.
Sorry if I'm interrupting, Angie, but there was an orchestral gig. I've been to 2 orchestral concerts during the COVID issues. There were only 2, basically. I mean, that's all.
Yes, you were there.
We were so lucky that we had 2, but one of them, they're both conducted by the same English conductor, whose name is Nicholas Braithwaite. And the first one, Adelaide Symphony, and it was Elgar's Serenade for Strings, and I cried all the way through it. Slow movement anyway. And then Beethoven Beethoven Emperor Concerto. I've got to get this right. And the second one was an amateur orchestra, which get together in Adelaide in the summer. They're called the Summer Orchestra, and they spend January, which is like our August, isn't it? Rehearsing. And they did Frank Bridge cello oration, the oration for cello, and the Shostakovich October Revolution. And nobody had played either of those pieces, and we were all sitting there going, this is an orchestra, and they're pieces we don't know, and this is just overwhelming. Especially with a wonderful soloist and beautiful conductor as well. So everything feels so special at the moment because it's so unusual.
That's such a good comment to make, and also it's inspiring for me, because I feel that the people who play in orchestras, they're intelligent, people. They deserve to be, to have a spotlight put on them sometimes. That's fantastic what you've just said. That's amazing.
It was amazing that we were so lucky that, and summer orchestra is something that you mentioned Edinburgh before, like the Edinburgh Rehearsal Orchestra used to do. Something that engages, like Pigot's. England has such a wonderful those things, and Nick comes straight from that because he came from Pigott. But you get that extra enthusiasm as well that you get with amateur orchestras and youth orchestras as well. That I don't mean to be mean to professional orchestras in any way, but the professionalism itself is a certain machine on the top of it. And if you take that off, I've just been coaching for the Amateur Chamber Music Society in South Australia as well. And people playing the Schubert Quintet who've never played it before, I mean, neither had I actually played it until recently. And the enthusiasm and then the energy that comes over with that performance. It was lovely.
Yes. Quite great. See, there we are again. Fantastic.
Judith, though, are you having to wait to actually hear your pieces be performed because we can't have live music in this country, in
yes.
UK?
No, that's absolutely the case. I've got several pieces waiting for first performances, and as we've just been discussing, in some cases where it's really very unclear when, for instance, large choruses will be able to stand behind orchestras and sing, and similarly when a large group of young people will be able to play woodwind instruments. You would need a very big venue at the moment to play my piece. I do believe the day will come, but certainly however, it's not unusual in my experience, because composers do write pieces hopefully a bit ahead of the premiere, so the waiting part of it is almost part of the fun, really.
So maybe South Australia and that side of the world is flying the flag for live music at the moment, while we're not able to.
Well, I think it really is. Yes.
We recently got. Sorry, I've interrupted. We recently got to play Handel's opera Acis and Galatea on original instruments just after the lockdown that we'd had. So it was in October last year, but it was outside. And so therefore the restrictions were much less. We didn't have to wear masks, and the audience were distanced on their blankets outside. Unfortunately, it was freezing on the dress rehearsal. That didn't help. We were already at baroque pitch, but we were really, really low. But I mean, Handel was an interesting composer to go back to, because he's so much been part of music for the people always. And so to play Handel Trio Sonata, but just after playing this beautiful opera, it was great. So we are very lucky, and I should say that with the summer orchestra, we all had to wear our masks in the audience. It's a horrible new world out there, isn't it? We've got to get used to this and manage. But
I think you're right, Angie, that it's incredibly inspiring at the moment just to hear about musicians actually working pretty normally. So that's perhaps yet another thing we could happily have in our inboxes, actually seeing that happen.
And that's also one of the reasons why Artaria is based entirely on chamber music. For me, it's always been my dream that it's actually, you probably remember this, that I've always had this dream since I was a teenager, really, that there would be a flexible group of independent chamber musicians who are able to go around and interact with their audience, whereas orchestras don't do that as much. You've got a blank concert hall miles away. I mean, the Albert Hall I used to work in, how many, 8,000, 7,000 people? I mean, you don't see faces. Whereas with chamber music, in a chamber, or in maybe outside sometimes, it's just a completely special one person to a part interaction. And so particularly now when the COVID's hit as well, when we're able to do the concerts and we've all got COVID plans and the right number of people in the rooms and all that, which makes it even more intimate, because it's not a big group at all. I mean, we're happily playing to 10 people, because that's all we're allowed to. And then you think, well, it's really special now.
Okay.
Angie, if we've got a bit more time, I was just wondering whether we should talk about the music festivals that were cancelled and the work that we would have done in Kent.
Well, yes, I mean, I was thinking I was going to mention it, and then I thought, no, I won't. But when I said about learning from Artaria doing functions that are sort of connected to the historic buildings, actually you've been involved in the past, haven't you, with Music at Morling, which actually does do that, because they perform in specific historic venues.
They do. I must say that is a fantastic event, and in a sense there is a relevance here, because it's all run by a musician who grew up in is it Morling? Have you said, is that, you must know how to say it, right? West Morling. Yes. Tom Kemp, and he's a very leading violinist in the London music scene, but he every year brings colleagues, really very, very top end of the range colleagues, down to his home village, which is a lovely, as you know, Angie, beautiful historic village in Kent. And that is really a marvellous festival. I think, is it a week or 10 days? But
about 10 days,
the concerts are in all sorts of amazing things. I remember one is up a hill in a kind of old airfield, and it just really shows what can be done. And sadly, last year's was cancelled. Of course, this is now where we are. We're just fingers crossed for anything that's planned for the summer. I have dates sort of May, June, looking a bit, we'll see. But everything now has gone from February and March. So, yeah.
It does feel slightly as if we're in quite a momentous moment in history as well, doesn't it? We're actually in history right now. We always have been, but now is even more so. And people who find it's the creative thinkers that are going to get us out of these situations, isn't it? Not just the musicians, but the artists and the actors and the authors and the writers. These people everybody actually, scientists as well. I mean, all sorts of people. But the people who may question the status quo or push the envelope or give you a new idea on something. They're the ones that are probably gonna help us move on through this.
Absolutely. The people that I've interviewed over the last year for work, I've noticed there's a real people either find their creativity is just completely stifled by lockdowns and so on, or the complete opposite, and their creativity just spirals, and I mean, in some cases I've interviewed people whose businesses have done really badly as a result of the restrictions, but then, for instance, I interviewed a couple who run escape rooms, which obviously they couldn't do in lockdown, but they just did it online instead, and their business grew. So it's just creative thinking. They just sat down and thought, what can we do that's different? Let's do this, and it's actually benefited them. So I think
if I have a chance to do a little shout out for my chair, my wonderful chair of Artaria, Susie Smith, who is a corporate CEO, but also an ex-music student and also an ex-champion swimmer as well. So she's got the discipline, but also the strategy of how to do something. And she was saying, well, yes, it's a very impossible time for the world, but it's also a very good time to be thinking of new digital initiatives. And the fact that you've got because I've got the synesthesia, I've always been playing music with the visuals on it, that I've always seen, Artaria, I've seen it. I've been seeing it for 30 years, but making films is quite a difficult area to get into. I can't wait to get into it more, but it's just because I wanted to recreate what was going on in my mind. And in fact, if that's a screen-based thing, now's a good time for that, really. But you can't do the exciting thing about saying to somebody, hey, let's do this, is magnified so much when somebody goes, yeah, great, let's do this. It's just a wonderful time. And maybe some people have just been lucky to meet with people that are like, yeah, that's a good idea.
Yeah, quite
lovely. Well, look, you're
well, yes, I think we've covered everything.
Yeah.
I hope you have a lovely day, because you're just at the morning and I'm at the end of it.
Well, good luck tomorrow, Celia, with your gig. And no, it's a joy to